Welcome to Desert Wanderers, produced by Salt and Light Radio. If you're new here, we bridge the gap between you and the person in the pew next to you. I will be interviewing priests, religious, and laity in our local Boise diocese, asking questions that'll help you navigate your vocation and help build community wherever you are with whatever resources you may have. Let's build the city of God together. Good morning, Sister Beverly. How are you?
Good morning, Natalie. I'm fine. How about you?
I'm doing well. Tell me more about where you live. So you live in Mesa. This last summer has been super smoky. So how is everything going? I know you guys are doing construction up there. Just give us a little update before we get into your story.
The smoke depends a lot on which way the wind is blowing. If the wind is bringing smoke from a nearby fire to us, the oppressive feeling is that you can't see the mountains around. Yeah. You have no sense of where you really are. It's the strangest feeling. Fortunately, it doesn't affect me physically. I can't complain about that. But some days when the wind is blowing towards us, and right now actually a new fire blew over from the Cascade Fire, and it's much closer to us, then the smoke is really bad. And but when it's clear, it's just so strange. It just completely depends on the wind. See, I'm making a recording of the building that's going up, our Jubilee Guest House. And so some days the pictures are a little bit like foggy and you can't see the mountains. And other days the sky is just a brilliant blue or cobalt blue or something just gorgeous. And it's completely different as far as the background.
So how many buildings do you have at your hermitage?
So it's 100 acres. And 12 buildings with one new one going up.
Yes. And the new one, tell us what that one's for.
The new one will be a guest house, meaning those who come on retreat in the past could ask for one of our hermitages, which is a self-contained cabin, basically. And now with the guest house, people are welcome to come and use that too, which will increase my capacity by 2 or 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah, so the guest house, the way the rooms are designed, they will each have a queen-size bed, which makes it a large room. Plus, it also has a complete bath inside the room. So that does make the room big. So in each of those rooms could house either one individual or it could house a married couple. Oh, so I could have 5 people in that building, or I could have 10 people in that building. So it's going to seem very different.
Yeah. Because
I have 4 hermitages for retreatants, and I'm going to have 5 more or 10 more people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
how does the acreage? You have 100 acres. Can they just go and look at it or like walk around? Because I'm assuming that where you live is very beautiful. Do you have paths and stuff that people can journey on, I suppose?
Well, if you love nature, you can find a path because the deer make the paths.
Right.
They're big like we are. So where they walk is around the bushes. They're not like little things that could go under or birds that could go over. But they're not man-made trails.
Okay.
So, and people can ask to visit, and they do sometimes, and they can, just help themselves by looking around. But, actually, anybody coming to Marymount would be best to ask if that's a good day to visit or not, because some days it's possible and some days it's not. Like, for instance, today I'm in Boise, so I can't show you around.
Yeah.
That would not be a good day today.
Yeah. That's wonderful, though, that you're able to share your time with us. We just are so grateful for you.
You're welcome.
You have an event coming up, is that correct, with the bishop?
Yes. So what is planned, we're going to have Mass with Bishop Peter as the celebrant. And what that occasion is, we're celebrating 40 years of Marymount Hermitage. So in November, 40 years ago, we began. And I think it's an important thing to stop and thank God for the blessings you've had when you get these milestone years.
And so because you're a hermitage, you're the only sister there. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So let's go ahead and kind of dive into that a little bit. So when I think of, sisters, most of the time in my mind, I think more of like a convent where there's a group of women. But could you go into first what maybe your vocation is, and then maybe we can go into the story about how you chose to become a hermit and how you became a sister, and we'll just go all the way through.
Well, maybe I'll start at the beginning.
That's
so the question is, why did I become a religious? And I've been a religious now for 57 years. Yeah. So that goes back a ways. It isn't really, which is true of anybody's vocation. It isn't a matter of I chose or I decided or I thought it was a good idea. It isn't like that. See, the word vocare means to call. So vocation means God has called each of us to something very special, something particular, something for us. And in my case, it's when I received my first communion. Oh, really? I really heard Jesus say, "Will you be mine?" Oh, my God. And so, I was only 8. So it's like, in my mind, that meant be a sister. That's how you would belong to Jesus in a special way. And I said, "Oh, yes, I will." Wow. So, and then I had made up my mind. I mean, it was a decision. And every stage of my life after that, it was the same thing. Like when I was high school, I was dating someone. High school's not so serious, but we spent a lot of time together because we enjoyed the same kind of things, leisure activities, for instance. And I told him right off, I said, I am going to be a sister. So if that makes a difference and you don't want to be my friend, that's okay. But just so you know, that's the plan. And he agreed that was okay. I'm not so sure he really thought I thought maybe at the end he was going to say, maybe I've changed your mind, but it didn't work out that way because I really felt called. It was, and I do believe this for everyone, a vocation is the way God will make you the happiest. Yeah. It'll fit all your talents and you'll be able to be very fulfilled in what you can do for Him, for the church, for people. And usually we can't really imagine how it's all going to unfold. And I think that's where sometimes people's fears come. But, I think it's actually easier for a child because a child doesn't have the worries that adults do. Yeah. So you just sail into it thinking this is normal. It wasn't until I was probably in my 30s that I thought, that's a pretty unusual story. And I had really never even told it till I was helping a priest in his parish in New Mexico. And he said, "I want you to go visit all the classrooms and talk to the children." And I said, "Okay, fine." He said, "What are you going to talk about?" I said, "No." I said, "You better come with me because I'm not sure what I'm going to say." Well, that made him pretty worried. But I just started telling him about how Jesus called me. And later I thought, I've never told anybody that. So children were the first ones I told that story to.
That's beautiful in itself, though. Mm-hmm. So I have 2 questions. The first one is, do you feel like your parents prepared you well in the faith, that was open? Or I guess, what was the foundation before?
That's actually good. Yes, that's a good question. I really consider this one of the great blessings of my life. Both my parents were very faithful Catholics. Very different in their approach to the faith. My dad was an intellectual. My dad just read, and the library we have at Marymount is my dad's library that we started as the core. I've got thousands of books. And so being very, knowledgeable about his faith and actually teaching about his faith was important to my dad. He taught like the youth in the parish when I was small. But my mother, being Hispanic, her faith was very deep, but it showed itself more in, you might say, the life of prayer and devotion, and but in a kind of a silent way, just a lived experience, but not so much. She didn't really talk that much about it. So that's a blessing to have parents that agree that the Catholic faith is the true faith. Yes. And you don't ever have to, question that. Another huge blessing for me is I was raised in a small town in southern Illinois. And at the parish, we had our own school. So this meant 1st through 8th grade that I had sisters teaching me. And sisters were just a part of my life. So I really admired them very much. They were wonderful women, and old and young. It was just, the whole range of ages, which was beautiful too. But I really, when I was very small, I had already made up my mind I wanted to be a teacher. I think that's strange because I was just starting school. How could I make up my mind? But anyway, that's me, I guess. Everybody has their own personalities. So the sisters were, I admired them as individuals. I admired them for being sisters, and I admired them for being teachers. And even now, after being an educator myself for the early part of my religious life, I can really say the education I received from them was just superior. It's the kind of quality that you wish every school had.
Yeah.
And you can't always say that that's so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you and I had previously spoke of like a couple months ago at this, a month ago at this point, but about how today we don't see very many sisters out. So do you think that part of this calling that you had was just because you were exposed to a lot of sisters? Very
much so.
Yeah.
It's just like they were so much a part of my life that their life seemed normal. Okay. It wasn't exotic. And actually, I went all the way through from 1st to 7th grade thinking that when I was old enough, I would just go to the convent that those sisters came from. They had their mother house in Indiana, and I was just going to join them. I just assumed that's how my life would unfold. But I didn't realize that God had other plans. My dad at that time heard about a Jesuit priest in San Francisco at the University of San Francisco who was setting up a program where married men could come and learn the faith really deeply in the sense of theology and be able to teach it to adults. Now, this was before Vatican II. This was the early 60s. He was very avant-garde in that sense, anticipating what the church was moving towards. Because, with Vatican II, we got lay married deacons, which weren't possible when my dad was exploring this. Yeah. And anyway, so we picked up and left Illinois and moved to San Francisco for a year so he could study. And I was starting 8th grade and really out of my element. I was still going to a Catholic school. It was a different community. These were wonderful sisters and really well-educated women. But it's so funny. I knew right away I wouldn't join that community. It didn't attract me. So you could see that there, and I mention that because when a young woman is thinking about religious life, I think it's important to visit and be on site at their mother house, at a convent, at a place where they live and work, because the whole thing you're trying to I shouldn't say the whole thing, but a part of what you're trying to discern is, does this life, does this atmosphere, does this sense of community feel like home to me? And if it does, then that's a real indication. If there's something that doesn't quite attract you, then that isn't it yet. You're still looking. And
so I guess that's another good piece of advice is, would you recommend that women go to different convents to see different orders, to see different, lifestyles? And I guess what would be your advice on that?
On that score, I think it's important because if you're not blessed with, you might say, being raised in and around sisters, then you have to be more proactive in visiting. And it would be something similar to when you're visiting universities or colleges to decide which one is going to offer the program that's best, depending on what I'm choosing as my specialty. You do have to visit to see what the campus is like, what the teachers are like, what the sort of sense of the student body is like. It'd be something similar to that, where you're making your best judgment based on your experience. I like to say we're an incarnational people. We know God because Jesus became a human being. Yeah. And so the same thing with religious life. It has to be the real thing. It can't just be a text or an email or a phone call. None of those things really work. It's okay for information, but that doesn't give you the feel. Is this the right community? Does this feel like home to me? Those things are very important. So then
I'll let you continue on about how you found where you're at now, but are you attached with a community currently as a hermit? So I guess maybe I don't understand the difference between being a religious sister with a community versus a hermitage. So what is the difference there?
Okay, we'll let that story unfold now. So now I'm in 8th grade in San Francisco waiting to find where's my dad going to be assigned, because the priest, after these men graduate, would assign him to a parish somewhere. Oh. And my dad was assigned to Beaverton, Oregon, which took us to Oregon as a family, and I'm the oldest of 7. So they were talking about a big family. It's not so easy to be moving like that.
Yeah. So was he a deacon?
No.
Or is he just an educator?
He was just, like we would say, working in faith formation for adults.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's the language you use today, but we didn't use those languages then. But same idea. Gotcha. So yeah, he was working with adults who were interested in becoming Catholic. So anyway, my dad was assigned to Beaverton, Oregon, and that's where I met the Sisters of St. Mary of Oregon, and went to high school at St. Mary of the Valley. And then after high school, joined the community there. Again, like for me, that was an organic development because the sisters seemed like my sisters and their convent seemed like my home. And at graduation, all of the other girls are crying because they're going to leave high school and it's all over. And I'm like, no, it's just beginning. This is a happy day.
Yeah.
So, and it was really, I would say it was the life I had envisioned for myself. Now, this is where, your vocation is a very mysterious thing. You'll look at somebody like Mother Teresa, and her story unfolds in a similar way. Now, mind you, I'm not comparing myself to her as a saint, as a holy person, but just the evolution of your vocation can take another distinctive turn. And I really did feel God calling me after about 10 years, after final vows and teaching. I mean, the community sent me to college and I had my degree and I was teaching. And I really did feel God calling me to a life of silence and solitude for the sake of prayer.
So can you go into, let's just take a step back for a second. What was college like as a sister? So are you going to a college where there are other students that are not religious, or are you going to a college that is specific for religious?
The college we went to as Sisters of St. Mary of Oregon is what was called Marylhurst at that time, which is kind of a suburb of Portland. So we'd get in our van and like 8 or 10 of us in this van would go to school for the day, because it was about an hour and a half away. Wow. As far as time. And that college was run by the Holy Name Sisters. Now they are in the Pacific Northwest. They were really the superior educators. They were, first of all, they were an international community, whereas Sisters of St. Mary of Oregon were very much a local community, just Washington and Oregon. Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, received a really good education, but the college was really for anybody, but it was populated a lot by sisters. Wow. So, the character of the college itself was definitely Catholic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so just to give you a little context, I went to Belmont Abbey in North Carolina, and so it was really nice because we had seminarians in our class, we had brothers in our class that were just, that lived at the Abbey. But I really enjoyed that as a single person that was discerning my vocation at the time, right? So I just think that it's so special that you had an opportunity where, although they were, what I'll say is, in my experience, they were kind of an example of another vocation, but it is definitely the norm to be a single person, right? Who's probably discerning marriage. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of beautiful in your situation that it's flipped, where it's like what God's calling you to, He's just surrounding you in and kind of probably, I'm not going to speak for you, but probably reinforcing that call and that love for the community that He's trying to place you in. Mm-hmm.
It's very true. Yeah, that was a really huge blessing. When I later, not so many years later, heard the Lord calling me to silence and solitude, like to be a hermit, I just couldn't imagine it, because first of all, I'm perfectly happy in the community. I've got final vows. The community paid for my college. I said, this isn't the time to leave. So I'm thinking, okay, now wait, when I retire, that'll be a good time to be a hermit. So I'd made up my mind. Okay, when I retire, then I'll answer the call to live as a hermit. But I got to put my work time in. It just seemed fair to me.
Right,
that's just the way I looked at it. But, as I tell people, God is very persistent. And if He has a plan and you're not following, He's going to keep telling you. Yeah. And so what happened to me was my brother, who was only 16, came down with spinal cancer and he was dying. And I was really stricken by that. I thought he was like second youngest in our family. And I thought, my gosh, he's 16 and his life is over. He can't say, well, I'll wait till I'm retired to do whatever God's calling me to. I said, maybe I better think twice about this. So I started being more serious about praying and discerning and asking myself the question, am I willing to say yes to God in this new vocation that He's calling me to? Because that was hard. My whole identity, and in a sense, my personality too, was set to be a teacher. Yeah. I mean, that was just like the core of me. I just couldn't imagine changing that. Yeah. So it took me about 3 years to finally say, yes, I will do it. But it was really an act of faith, because it could kind of imagine being very happy. I mean, I just couldn't imagine it. That's just the limitation,
So what was that call like, or how did that thought or this calling come to you? Do you
just, you might say like a magnet. You can't put words on it and you can't see it.
Sure.
But it was a pull. I felt more called to prayer. I prayed more. I prayed in the middle of the night for an hour, even as a teacher. And it's just like I just couldn't get enough of prayer. And I thought, well, maybe he's giving me this grace. I should say yes.
Yeah. And so it took you 3 years. And then what was it like when you transitioned into the Hermitage? Okay, pause before I ask that question. So then how did you go to Marymount? Is that where you started at your Hermitage, or how did you?
Well, see, that's a whole big story too.
Yeah, how did you even get formed or placed?
Okay, so first of all, when you have final vows in a religious community, you're just not footloose and fancy free. You don't just be like going off. Mm-hmm. I had to have, with another sister, actually, there were 2 of us at the time, we had to have permission from our community, and it's called leave of absence. So it's like you're not just like in the military, AWOL, you don't just like leave. You have permission to be gone for this year. And we were working with Bishop Thomas Conley of the Diocese of Baker, which is a different diocese than Beaverton is in. Beaverton's in the Portland Archdiocese. And he was willing to have us be hermits in his diocese. But he did say during the weekend we spent with him, he said, my friend Bishop Trinan in Idaho really would like you to come to Idaho to belong to the Diocese of Boise. And it's very clear, if you read the lives of the saints, it's obvious, but just as a principle, you don't do anything really in the church without somebody's permission and authority, somebody who oversees, for the sake not only of that individual, to say the church is guiding you and helping you to the best we can, but to say to other people, this isn't a scam. This isn't somebody just saying they're this, but they're really not. I mean, the church is always protecting us, Yeah. So we really had no idea of leaving Oregon, but Bishop Conley wanted us to have the best advantage, and he thought Bishop Trinan would be able to provide it. And it's just because the Diocese of Boise was bigger, and Bishop Trinan didn't have contemplative sisters here at that time, and he just thought that's the way it would be the best for us. So we were willing to come. At the time we had here in Boise what was called Nazareth Retreat Center, which is on 5 Mile. Yeah. And so we lived and worked there for 3 years. And we didn't really realize it, but Bishop Trinan was really hoping we'd stay and take care of the retreat center. Yes. He would say, well, you can live a life of prayer, but you can help other people to pray when they come here on retreat. And we just really couldn't see it, because in our minds we had the idea of really physical, in the sense of Western solitude, real solitude, not like you're in a neighborhood. Yeah. And I mean, and the houses are like next to each other. It's just, that just doesn't give you the right idea of solitude. Right. So we really couldn't see that for our future. And I will say very generously, very lovingly, very sacrificially, Bishop Trinan said, then it's not going to be easy, but we'll have to try to find property for you. He said, so much of Idaho is a national forest. Mm-hmm. It's going to be hard to find what you really want. I mean, not that he was going to pay for it. I don't mean that, but it's still to have a bishop recommend you if you're going around looking for properties. Which he did. He took us to see a rancher in Mesa, Idaho, Jim Ball, who's now dead. And Jim's mother had wanted to give property to a men's community, because in those days, people in Mesa didn't have daily mass. And she remembers the days when you only had mass on a Sunday once a month. Yeah. I mean, it was really pioneer territory in the old days. And a lot of the old timers this is 40 years ago, they remembered that. Oh, we never had mass on Christmas, or we never had mass on Easter. It was the day before or the day after, or whenever the priest could get here. It's just like really, really pioneer days. Was still in the memory of a lot of the older ones that were living there at that time. So she thought, well, wouldn't it be great? We'd have some religious men here, and we'd have mass every day. We'd feel like, we're really Catholic. And so Jim's mother had already died the year we met him. She had already died in January of that year. So, but it was fresh in his mind that that's what his mother wanted, and he was willing to give us property. It's so funny, because Sister Rebecca Mary and I had, for all this time, we'd been saying, because Sister was in love with the idea of living in a very Western sort of environment, because she was not raised that way. She was raised in Tacoma, Washington. But anyway, we had said, well, if we had 100 acres, we'd put a chapel in the middle, and the hermitages could be, around, so they each had their own real solitude in a Western way. And we were imagining this. And then when Jim finally said, well, so how much property do you need? How many acres do you want? well, I just couldn't say 100. I just kind of gulped and I said, well, maybe 40 acres. And he frowned and I thought, oh, even that's too much. Oh dear. Now what? And then he said, no, the way you've been describing your life, I think you need 100 acres.
Oh my goodness.
And everything in the story is like that. It's like the Lord just kept opening doors. It's just, he just made it possible at every stage. It's hard to tell all the miracles that happened in those days. But anyway, we located in Mesa, Idaho on the 100 acres Jim gave us from his ranch. And,
so is the Hermitage, is it in the middle of the 100 acres?
Uh-huh.
Oh, beautiful. So you really are surrounded by just nature then.
We are. And actually later in his life, when he sold the ranch for family reasons, he made sure that the property around us was all really big acreage, like 120 or 160 or, these big tracts, so that there would never be anything like a, subdivision or apartment complex or something like that near us.
Yeah. Wow. What he was looking out for you too.
He was.
It's just beautiful.
Oh yeah. It's very beautiful.
So did you have any priests come and stay with you for periods of time? Because I know that she said that she wanted, mass every day. So
I know. We, in the first, I'm trying to think, it's probably about 10 or 15 years. The first of those years, we did have a chaplain. Each, a chaplain would come and be there for 2 years, and then somebody else would come and be there for 3 years. Somebody else would come here and be there for 8 years. Somebody else would come and be there for 1 year. But we had a series of priests that came through. We actually did have daily mass very consistently those first years.
Wow, that's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Now, I skipped a part that has to do with religious life, and it's back to answer your question about the difference between being a hermit and being a religious. So when it was clear to everybody involved, Sister Rebecca Mary and myself and our community in Beaverton and Bishop Trinan here in Idaho, that God had called us and it was going to be possible for us to found a hermitage for women hermits. Our community was willing to give us, you might say, the permission to leave. It's like, the blessing. Yeah. And one of the ways we were blessed is they gave us our profession rings. Oh, because really? It's the idea we didn't give up on the Lord, and He didn't give up on us. This is a continuation of the profession we made. Mm-hmm. So we have our profession rings. Oh my goodness. That's really a blessing. That is. Because otherwise, of course, something like that you'd have to give back if you were leaving normally. Really? Oh yeah, because it doesn't belong to you; it belongs to the community. Oh, so, with the vow of poverty, you don't have anything either, know. Right. So, but Bishop Trinan also was very protective of us in the sense that he didn't want us to just say, "Okay, we're not Sisters of St. Mary of Oregon anymore." So, but are we? He made sure that when we made our vows as hermits, that's when the break would take place, that they would be simultaneous, and he had the documents from Rome to say that. So that was his way of protecting our public witness and our profession and our belonging to the Lord, so there never would be a break. And I just thought, only a bishop can do that. So it's like, none of us think about things like that, but that was very precious.
And did your remind me of your sister's name?
Sisters of St. Mary of Oregon.
Oh no, the one that
Sister Rebecca Mary.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Sister Rebecca Mary. She stayed at the Hermitage with you?
She was there the first trying to think how many years this would be. Something like 28 or something. Because she's a generation older than I am. So she turns 94 this September. Wow. And she's in very frail health. And our sisters, this is another whole long story, but our sisters took her back to take care of her in the infirmary. So, that's a huge blessing, because you don't get better care than that in this world when you're elderly. Yes. Sisters waiting on you hand and foot. I mean, So that's just great.
Okay, so then I'm going to clarify something. First, when I heard you talk, he said that he wanted the break to be when you became a hermit. So are you guys still linked in any capacity then? Because you were saying there was some papers. I guess I'm a little confused on that.
Well, I probably didn't outline it carefully. So when we began our life as hermits at Marymount, which is the name Bishop Trinan gave us, he chose that because we're Hermit Sisters of Mary, mm-hmm. and in the mountains, so he thought Marymount was the right name for it. Right. Yeah, so So when we made our vows as hermits of the Diocese of Boise, then we were no longer Sisters of St. Mary. We belonged to the Diocese of Boise.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So as it is now, whoever the Bishop of Idaho is, now it's Bishop Peter Christensen, he is my quote-unquote religious superior. And I see him to explain how things are going and ask the permissions I need. And for instance, to raise money and build a big building like that. This isn't unusual, though. If it was a parish, a priest would have to do the same thing. But big things like that, the church oversees those things. Just again, like I say, to protect everyone. The bishop says, yes, I can see this will work. It's a good plan. It's not going to be a catastrophe for somebody. And also to the public, this is, I've given permission for this. So if you want to support it, it's a worthy cause, things like that. So people have confidence. This is really legitimate.
I think sometimes, and this might be a little tangent off of religious life, but I think sometimes people think that the Catholic Church has a lot of rules. And I think the reason that something I've started to see recently is that the rules aren't necessarily there to say no, but were built off of some kind of protection previously.
Exactly.
So one of the ones that was coming to my mind recently was getting married in the Catholic Church. Like, I think previously what was happening is people were getting married in secret, and then the woman would come out and say, I'm married to this person, and the man would reject it. Right. And so the church said, okay, from now on, like, you need to be married with witnesses in the church so that we can verify and validate that, so that this woman has protection and she has legal rights, within the parish. So I just really appreciate that you're really hitting the protection that the church provides, because again, it's like, yes, there are rules, but they were put in place for a reason to protect people in general. So I just thought that was a really, I think that's important to outline as we're talking about, the church structure. So
when you think about the church has 2,000 years to experience what can happen to human beings, these things have been put in place for hundreds of years in some cases, because it's more of a protection for people. And what you're saying is really, really good, really, really right.
Well, it took us, I think, and it's almost, what am I trying to say? It's very, we live in such a time where everything needs to be comfortable and easy, and we should have everything at our disposal, right? And so when we get hit with roadblocks or with rules, sometimes I think a lot of people can kind of turn away and be like, I don't understand that. This is, old and dumb, and I don't want to deal with that, instead of looking into it. And I'm not even saying I'm good at that, because my husband's the one that's he's like your dad. He's very intellectually, likes to read a lot. And so I appreciate, one of the things I've appreciated about marrying him is when we have a concern or we're worried about something, he goes straight into the Code of Canon Law, which is like,
oh yes, I know. Well,
it's
like, oh yeah,
and he'll go and he'll read, and that's how we learned about that piece, right? About being married in the church and the history behind it. So I really appreciate him. I'm not saying I'm good at that, but yeah, I think the more that we've asked questions, and instead of just accepting it and just looking into it and learning about it, I think the more I've understood, okay, there is a legitimate reason behind everything that we do, so yeah. So I really appreciate that you're reinforcing that there's these protections that the church provides for you. And I just think that's a really good piece to kind of put in there as well. So then my next question I would have for you is, what does your daily life look like as a hermit?
I can say it like a mathematical formula, which won't satisfy anybody, but I have about 8 hours a day of prayer. Okay. I spend 4 hours a day officially working, trying to get 8 hours of work done in 4 hours. That's what I'm trying to do. I spend a lot of time reading, because when I eat, I'm reading. And I eat slowly, as everybody knows if you've ever eaten with me. So I get a lot of reading done when I'm eating. And then, in the morning when I'm spending more time in prayer, and in the evening before I go to bed, I'm reading also. So reading actually is a big part of my day too. more chopped into pieces though. And, I have to eat and I have to sleep and just the things, self-care like that. But that takes up the day for sure.
What about daily tasks? So do you have animals that you take care of, or do you go to the grocery store, or kind of what does it look like for practical, practical things?
Right now, I don't have any animals. For most of our history, both Sister Rebecca, Mary, and I had cats, because if you don't have cats, you have mice. What I have now is mice, and they take care of me rather than the other way around. But, yeah, gee.
Oh.
If you live in the country, you've got mice, period.
It sounds like you need some new cats.
Oh, so. Yeah. Anyway, I do the things anybody would in their own household. I have to keep my house clean, and I have to cook for myself, which means I have to buy groceries and I have to wash dishes and, pay the bills once a month, balance the checkbook and, just those normal things, answering correspondence. Actually, correspondence is a huge part of my job, to write thank you notes for things that people are kind enough to share with me. And also, another aspect is just the communication that goes. I mean, it sounds like a contradiction. I'm a hermit and I keep silence, but I'm worried about communication. But the thing is, it being, you might say, a religious entity. So Marymount being a religious, organization, there is a certain amount of communication that's public, that's necessary. Bishop Trinan was the one that was very clear about that in the beginning. He said, people don't know what a hermit is. People don't know what a Catholic sister is. People don't know what a hermitage is. It's your job. It's like your teachers. It's your job to explain these things to people. Yeah. And it's an ongoing thing, of course, because, it's not like ever over and done with. So one of the things I do once a month is I publish a newsletter, and that's on my website. It's usually 2 pages. It can be 3. Once in a while, very rarely, it's longer, but try to, keep it to just photographs and just kind of the important things that I want to say for this month. So some of it is spiritual, some of it is news. I solicit writing from other people on occasion, like retreatants. If I can tell, teachers know these things. If I can tell somebody be good at writing, I suggest maybe you'd like to share about your retreat. So other people would say, well, hey, I could do that. And it's an encouragement to other people to want to spend time in prayer and seeking the Lord. And so the feature article for this newsletter this month, September, is a retreatant who came from Indiana. He tells a little bit about his background and his story, how they came here, and they've become very close friends. They've come now for 4 different years. Wow. And now he's on my board even. So anyway, the newsletter, I could have been a journalist in another life. I say this about other things too, but I like photography. I like writing. I like editing. I like publishing. It's like, I don't know why. I'm just into it.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. I guess I really do believe God gives us our gifts, and he's obviously helping me to do what I would need to do anyway to some extent. So I do the newsletter, and then the website has to be maintained, which I don't do a very good job of that. But like, for instance, right now building this new guest house, the guest house itself has its own category, its own section on the website. And I keep that updated also. And I just, if I say I just published, I'm a little bit premature. My webmaster is putting this up yet, but it'll be 3 pages that show you how the building has gone in the last month. It's just astonishing how fast it's gone up. I mean, it's all built, you might say. It's all closed in.
Wow.
And then we just started at the end of July. Oh here's the beginning of September. So, it's just that part of a building does go fast if your workers are there all the time, every day, getting their jobs done, which has just been remarkable. But so that's a fun page. Those pages are fun because it's mostly pictures, just a little bit of text so you know what you're looking at. And then also because of building this new guest house and needing, I'm paying probably $100,000 or more a month.
Wow.
$100,000 a month. I don't even know how much money that is, but that's what I've been paying out per month to pay workers and pay for their supplies, their building supplies. So, you know what? I can't keep this up without donations, So I'm also writing letters to people. At this point, this is kind of a turn. It's a different thing. It's not just saying, I did send out postcards to everybody. I brought one for you. I've got it in my pile here on the floor. Just telling and asking but those are just general, just whatever you can write a little bit on a postcard. But I'm actually writing personal letters to people, actually asking them to help me with fundraising. Do you have family members? Do you have friends? Do you have business associates? You could all get together and actually send me a major donation because, money like that, it's like, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot. I mean,
the building is almost $1 million. I just don't even know how much that is, really.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
Yes.
So anyway, right now correspondence is a really big
part of it.
Part of my work.
So it sounds like you basically run a business.
I do.
Yeah.
Actually, I have several businesses.
Yeah.
This is what's hard to explain. How we earned Bishop Trinan was very clear about you are not to live on donations. He said all contemplative monasteries do. They wait for the mail to come in, look at it. He'd hold it up like to the light and say, let's see, is there a check in there? I thought he was just being funny, but he was being serious. And what he meant was, not to be so focused on money coming in, but let's just do what you can to provide for your own needs. He thought, because we accepted the rule of St. Benedict as sort of the basics of our rule of life. And working is a really big factor in that rule. And it's very much the Desert Fathers. So for years, we did actually, Sister Rebecca, Mary, and I earned our living by making things to sell. And I would come to the Treasure Valley and actually other places in Idaho once a month, in the summertime, maybe twice a month, at one of the parish, set up like 14 conference tables with stuff that we had to sell. And I'd bring home $1,000 or $2,000 a month, which is what we needed to live on.
Yeah.
And that was very successful and productive, and it was the way I got to meet people and add them to my mailing list. And it means, getting more acquainted with the Catholics of the Treasure Valley, for instance. That's very important. And so one of the things that has happened as the years have gone on is I can see that more and more people, and I think it's really the state of the world and the state of our country, more and more people want to pray. They want to go on retreat, and they're asking for those facilities. Yeah. So we've always had extra hermitages because we thought other women would join us and we'd have a Hermit Sisters community. But women came, discerned, but nobody stayed. And I said, in the meantime, we can't just let these buildings sit empty. So if anybody wants to just come on retreat, let's just do that. I had no idea of setting up a retreat business or anything, but it's evolved into that. Yeah. So that's another business now. Yeah, the retreat part. So, and then, even just keeping up the buildings and the property, all of that's definitely work. You have to plow the roads in the wintertime, and then the summertime you have to do maintenance on the buildings. And, it's just it's huge.
That's what I was thinking. Okay. So I know that we had talked about, what your day looks like, but your day is so you have a whole day filled for the rest of the year. You have so much to do. So do you have the equipment to plow in the winter?
Well, of course, I'm not personally doing it, but even just overseeing workmen to do the work, right, and there's a certain amount of time involved in that, even though they're doing the work. But still, I talk to them when they come, and then I see what they did before they leave, and then I pay them or whatever. Right. That's time consuming, actually.
Yeah, just working the logistics of things is often very time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
So my question would be, when you first decided to become when you first felt called to become a hermit, were you ever just nervous about the life of a hermit, right? Because previously as a sister, you were teaching, you had you had work and prayer, and
mm-hmm.
you had your community.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever just feel like you would, I guess, miss part of the busyness?
I don't know that I thought about it in that way.
And again,
I can see.
Not asking
well,
the question, right?
no, it's a legitimate question. But what we did was we incorporated things into our daily life from religious life in a certain extent. Like, say, the hour from 7 to 8 in the evening is recreation. Mm-hmm. Well, we're not talking together. We're just reading or doing some like craft work or something like that. That's fun. Mm-hmm. So we incorporated the components of religious life into our hermit life, but it's just we weren't doing it with anybody. because we're living alone. Now, our sisters used to say this to me when we first started visiting them after being gone for a number of years. I'd come back to St. Mary of the Valley, and the sisters would say, "Don't you miss teaching?" And then I'd say, as in cry every day for 20 years, yes, I did miss teaching.
Oh, so you really felt called to be a teacher. So
I did.
Okay, so here's another good question, I think, is sometimes God provides us with two goods, and we have to choose one of the two goods. And it's not like either one of those goods are bad, right? Or one's more gooder than the other, right? So how do you choose between them? So like you had this calling, obviously you had a calling to be a teacher. If it was something so strong to you. But then you had this call to silence, and both of them were good, right? So how do you work through that?
In the beginning, I really felt that it was either or.
You did?
Again, because I'm very black and white. That's just my personality. It's not a good thing necessarily, but it's the way I am. So I thought if I become a hermit, that means I'm not a teacher. And I remember the first day somebody said to me, well, who are you? What do you do? And I said, I'm a hermit. And instead of saying I'm a teacher, it's just like my heart died that day. And I really did think it was like Abraham's sacrifice. God's calling him to sacrifice his only son, the gift of this promise. Who can explain that? Yeah. And there he is with the knife before the angel says, no, I just want to see if you're going to be obeying God. Yeah. Well, that's kind of the way it was for me, because I really thought I would never teach again. And that's what I was grieving over. And it's so strange because the way God evolved, it's going to make me cry, because God always is generous. Always. But we don't anticipate it because we don't know him well enough. You know, a priest would say, well, why don't you come to my parish and teach about a class about Our Lady? Or why don't you come to my parish and do a weekend retreat for us? Or this or that. And priests started inviting me, knowing I had been a teacher. And of course I said yes, because it's an invitation and I want to support him in his parish. And it's like, all of a sudden, I've got another business, and that's teaching and giving retreats.
Oh my goodness, God is good.
Even broadcasting on Salt and Light Radio.
Yes.
It's unreal. Me, who never listened to radio in my entire life. Ever.
And here you are.
Even as a teenager. I think that's hysterically funny.
God is so good. I loved what you said, though, about we're fearful because we don't know God well enough. I think that is so true for me.
For all of us. We're limited. We're limited, and we need to grow. That's the whole point of life. Our life is to help us grow in our love, in our knowledge of him and our love for him. But one of the key things to answer your question about how can you choose between this or this good, the real question is, which is his will. We become holy and saintly doing his will. And that's the hardest thing to give up, because it's the core of who we are, and that's our free will. Yeah. We have to say yes in our wills to what God wills. If we really trust him and we know that's what's going to make us happiest, even though we can't see it, then that's where real peace is. It's real peace.
So I do have another question. So when Bishop Trinan was telling you that he wanted you to work, did you ever think about maybe teaching as part of that work?
I didn't.
No. Interesting. Part of your vow as a hermit, is that to be distant from community? And like, so would teaching as a hermit be kind of like a nonsensical statement?
No. So we'll make this as simple as it can be, so it'll be clear. Bishop Trinan wanted us to earn our own living. We interpreted that as, okay, we're here at the Hermitage. What can we make and sell? Oh, okay. And then eventually but people want to come on retreat. Oh, well, that's earning our living. Okay. So that evolved. And then when the priest invited me, actually sister too in the beginning, but she didn't really feel as drawn to it as I did, to teach in parishes like RCIA or something like that. Yeah. I told the priest right away, I'm a hermit. I can't do this every week. I can't do this every day. I will come to your parish once a year. You may invite me once a year. So that's been the stipulation that I've made with the priests of the diocese. Well, actually, I teach other dioceses too, but just, it can't. There was only 1 year for circumstances that were very special. I taught RCIA in Weiser every week for the school year. And I would never do that again. But because of the circumstances, then I did it.
Yeah. Okay. So did you work with Father Jerry then a lot?
No. Well, yes, he would invite me, and I would teach sometimes, when he was there for just once a year. But the RCIA that I did at that time in Weiser was under Father Rob Cook. I don't know if you remember him.
I'm not sure. Okay. Well, then, so I had another question for you. We had talked about you having this retreat part of your business, right? And it sounded like you had someone from Illinois. Is that correct? Do you have people from all over the U.S. come?
I do. Sometimes out of the country. Canadians. We had a woman from Spain that was coming once a year until she died.
Oh my goodness. So, yeah. How do they hear about your hermitage?
The website.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you, the Lord really showed me clearly that the retreat part of, if I call it my business, is just kind of in quotes. The retreat part is important to him because what do you think happened during COVID? The normal narrative is monasteries were closed, retreat centers were closed, abbeys were closed, schools were closed. Everybody was closed because social distancing and all that. Well, at Marymount, the Hermitage are so far apart, and the chapel will hold 3 or 4 people, and you're already, if I say a mile apart, I don't mean a mile, but, they're not close. And I was open already in May. At the first year of COVID. Wow. May. I was only closed for about a month, well, about 6 weeks. About 6 weeks. And
was it kind of silly when it closed? Were you like, I'm just doing
I'm already a hermit. I don't have to worry. And I had Bishop Peter's permission to do it. I opened up Marymount in May of the year we had COVID. And so what happened? Like my friends from Indiana, he's like, well, we're oblates of the Trappist in Kentucky at Gethsemane. And we're supposed to make a retreat once a year, but everything's closed. What are we going to do? Isn't there any place in the United States open? And he goes, Catholic, retreat place open, or something like that. And Marymount was the only one.
Oh my goodness.
And so he says to his wife, do you want to go to Idaho? She goes, why not? And I mean, we're like best friends now. And the thing is, I started getting all kinds of people from out of state because I was open. Nobody else was open. So that's when the retreat business just grew like crazy.
Oh my goodness.
And you can't imagine that. Only God could have written that script.
Yeah. So that's crazy. And it's okay. The other part is I did work previously before working for Salt and Light. I did a little bit of search engine optimization, right? So how your website can be found. And I think what's crazier is that your website was being reached. Like that's just like God's grace. It's just like super beautiful. That is a great story.
Well, see, as a professional, you're looking at what I said in a professional manner. And you're saying, how did her website come up first when everybody pays millions of dollars to make sure that happens to their business?
Right.
But the thing is, our neighbor, who's now dead, died 2 years ago, he was my webmaster since the beginning of Marymount, and he's the one that insisted we have to have a website. And Sister and I are like, who cares about a website? We don't need a website. And he's like, yes, you do. It's the new way to communicate. Forget about newspapers or, Yeah. And like, oh, well, if we have to, And he's the one that said, and I've fixed it so when they say Catholic retreat or Catholic hermitage, yours will come up first. He built that into the website.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't know technicalities enough to explain it, but I just know that he said yours will come up first.
Wow.
So, and because he had come from Seattle and he knew this was his background, building websites and all that.
When you say that God has been working in your life, all the gifts that he's like given you so that you could live this life.
Oh, I know. No, it's really true.
He's just like absolutely wrapped you in all of his care, like all of the cares that you could have. He's wrapped you up. It's like a big blanket.
I know. If I tell myself this when I start getting discouraged about a particular thing, I think after all this long life and all God's done for you, now you should worry. Yeah. Now that is really crazy.
Yeah. I love that piece of scripture. I feel like this is something, I don't really know where I got it, that it stuck so much with me, but it always has. But the part where, I'm going to paraphrase, where it's like, the birds have their, or no, how does it go? If God, can clothe the flowers with beautiful petals, then why should you worry? Why should you worry about him clothing you? Because he loves you infinitely more than the flowers. I forget what it goes into. I think they do talk about
the
birds
too.
and the nest,
Mm-hmm.
and then but it goes on to that passage, and I've always loved that. I think it gives great peace, but it's kind of like what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Why would you worry now? He's given you all of these things, clothed you, put you in a building. It's just beautiful. So, typically, how would it look for someone that wanted to come on retreat? Would they just have to go to the website?
Yes, they can. Usually people call because somehow the telephone is easier, I guess, for most people. But I ask them to then send me an email because this gives me the ability to make a record of the discussion of the details, so I can print that off and have it in my files for what date they're requesting, name, address, and all their information. Because what I ask them to do then is to send me an email to say, these are the dates I'm requesting. Is the calendar open? Because with only 4 hermitages, and for a while I only had 3, it's easy to say, I'm sorry, they're all full. I don't have any room right now. So we agree on dates for their retreat. And then I ask them to go to the website and print the application form. The application form is actually for 2 reasons. It's to help this person make sure they understand the ins and outs of making a retreat at a hermitage. Mm-hmm. The silence is serious. The solitude is serious. You have to have a plan. You have to kind of organize in your mind how the days are going to unfold, what things you need to bring for yourself. You have to cook for yourself, for instance. And I ask, just outline how your day will be. So they're consciously saying, okay, I'm going to spend this much time in prayer, this much time in reading, this much time with my craft, or I go for a walk, or do this exercise, or they can ask for work. They can ask for manual work if they want to. I tell them it's a help to me, but it's not required. Mm-hmm. And if it's something that helps you stay peaceful in the solitude, that's a good thing. That's one of the advantages of it. So the person is going through to make sure that what we really have at Marymount is what they really want. Yeah. And I'm then reading that same application going, what's the spirit that seems to be coming from the way this person worded the things they're answering? Because there can be things I pick up on and I just say, I know this isn't going to work. In all fairness to this individual, I need to say that it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. But it's rare that I refuse someone. It has to be something that's, in my mind, very particular. Normally, I say yes. And there are some restrictions as far as length of time. If you've never been to Marymount, I would suggest maybe 3 to 5 days, 7 at the most, because you're experiencing it for the first time. Now, after a person's been to Marymount, they usually want to come back. So they want to come back the next year forever. And then that's different. If they want to come for a longer time, if they've done fine for a week, they can come for 2 weeks. But I don't let anybody come for a long time until they find out if they can handle it. And I find out if it's good for them, because I feel in a certain extent I am responsible for overseeing if the person is really doing well in solitude or not, because if they're not, it's not fair to them to stay. And I have had people leave early because it just isn't working out for them. I'll mention one example you can see, because this is very dramatic. A lady came from out of state and she asked for a week. I didn't think anything of it. She was young and, healthy and active, and married woman. And after about 4 days, she said, Sister, I think I have to leave. This isn't working for me. And I was kind of shocked because I didn't have a feeling that she wasn't doing well. But she said, I've had 8 miscarriages in a row and it's all kind of coming down on me now. I shouldn't stay because it's making me depressed. I thought that was good discernment, because that's, she's grieving and she doesn't need solitude. She needs something else, you see. So it's like, I just felt so sorry for her.
Yeah. Oh, that's really hard.
Oh, it would be.
Do you think that, many people come to you in search for solitude in discernment, or in like kind of working out emotional needs, I guess? Do you think that they seek the silence to discern that?
I have a feeling that's a little more rare. Those 2 instances that you gave as an example. The average person that asks me to come is coming because they're Catholic, and making a retreat once a year is important in their spiritual life, and it's part of their spiritual discipline for the year.
Okay.
And they just want to spend more hours in prayer. They want to be able to read more. They want to be away from their responsibilities so they can just be completely at leisure. Mm-hmm. It isn't as intense as they're discerning or they're trying to decide something. Usually not. And I'm not saying they can't. A person certainly could. But normally, these are just people asking for their yearly retreat.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so another thing you said was people have to cook for themselves too. Mm-hmm. So people bring in all of their food?
That's correct.
Okay. So there isn't like a chow hall, Okay. So when you say you're in silence, then you're really in silence because you're even eating your meals in silence and everything. So how does that work? Because I know this new building you guys are trying to put up is going to host couples. So how do you feel like that will work in terms of silence, or how are you going to navigate when couples want to come on retreat?
Well, I ask a lot of prayers. I have it in my mind, and this is what I will propose. We'll see how it goes. So usually when somebody arrives for a retreat, so this would be the same if it's an individual or if it's a couple in the guest house, I show them around so they know where the chapel is, give them some ideas how that can be used. It's never locked. I show them the library. It's never locked, how they can use that. And then the actual guest house, they have their own bedroom, which is a large room, and it has a little table with 2 chairs. I already have the furniture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the building, the little room will have that. Not little, the bedroom will. Your own room will have a certain amount of furniture. So, for instance, let's say breakfast. I think this is the easiest thing. For your breakfast, you just want a bowl of cereal. Fine. You go into the kitchen, make a bowl of cereal, bring it back, put it on your table, and eat in your room. Mm-hmm. There's your silence. If you want to go to the kitchen and make a huge breakfast, like farmer's breakfast, well, that's fine. Probably nobody else will come in while you're doing that, and that's fine. When you're done, then somebody else can come in and use the kitchen. So when I give them the orientation, the idea is out of respect for other people, you're free of any social obligations. You don't need to speak to this person. They're seeking God in silence and solitude. You're doing the same thing. Give each other the freedom to do that. Now, that doesn't mean if somebody's dying or they're sick or they're asking for help, you're going to ignore them. Right. Just, be reasonable. But I think so much of our life, we have these social obligations and we just do it because we have to. It's like, it's such a freedom not to have that. You just can mind your own business and nobody's worrying about it. Yeah. So, like, for instance, if they go into the living room, I'm going to have different kind of nooks and crannies so you can be alone and read or whatever you're doing, write in your journal or whatever you're doing in there. And everybody's doing whatever they're doing. It's, I just think it's possible. I've seen this work at the Trappist Abbey where I used to go for my retreat in Oregon. They had some rooms like that. And people were just very respectful of the fact the monks keep silence. We keep silence while we're here. It's a discipline, but honestly, it becomes a real pleasure when you get into it.
I do think that there's something about a friendship when you can be comfortable. It's nice to have someone there, but not necessarily you need to talk to them. There's that comfort and warmth, but you can still be in a state where you can relax and enjoy and not feel like there's pressure. So there's part of that to it, I'm sure, as well. I guess my question is, I would think that if couples are staying together, it would be hard I'm thinking myself, it would be hard for me to not want to talk to my husband. Oh, I had this really good insight into this verse. And,
I understand how you're saying that, and those things are good. What I suggest for married couples when they come, and it'll be the same with the guest house too, there's only one hermitage that can accommodate a couple. This is why I really need the guest house. If married couples are going to come together, wanting the same, to share the building. I say that one of the ways you plan your retreat is you talk together about when are we going to share and when are we going to have our silent time.
That's beautiful.
And, maybe you want to have silence all morning, and then when lunch comes, we're going to eat together and talk about how our morning went or whatever. Yeah. You plan it out ahead of time. So it's not like, well, I wonder. That's kind of tense, Right. We don't want that.
So it does seem like you have had enough people that you've come up with a good guidance, I guess, for them to come into that. Because I think in my mind, I was like, wow, I don't know. Would we be able to talk at the end of the day? And I would be the person that if I didn't have guidance, I'd be like, look at this. Oh, don't you have this type of reflection too? And blah, blah, blah. I want to share all that. So it's actually really neat that you have structures that you can kind of give people ideas on how they should go through their time there.
This is a couple of comments for married couples, because this is will be newer for Marymount, because as I said, I've only had one place for a couple. First of all, it is faithfully married couples who have given me this idea. I have them make a reservation saying, we're making retreat together because this is our anniversary. And that's so beautiful. It makes me want to cry that they want to celebrate their anniversary by praying together. It's like, wow. So that's a beautiful thing. And so what I'm going to do with the guest house is I have one bedroom that's the master bedroom, and it's a double room. So there's like a sitting room and a dining room and the bedroom and a double bathroom. It's huge. It's like an apartment. And I'm going to call it the anniversary suite. So if you come on your wedding anniversary, you get one night for free. And that'll just be part of that, guest house as the facility that I have.
That's okay.
And so this couple that did it the first time, they came 2 years in a row doing that when it was at the end of May, their anniversary, which is the prettiest time at Marymount. And then after their daughter was married, their first daughter, she writes and says, my husband and I are celebrating our second anniversary. We want to come on retreat, just like her parents did. And let's see, learned behavior. This is wonderful.
That was
so beautiful. It's very beautiful.
Oh my goodness. Mm-hmm. Okay, so
now the other thing is, the other thing is, and some married couples have done this, is we want to come to retreat together, but we know ourselves we need more space. Well, of course, the Hermitage is, if you're in a confined space, two of you, it's harder because it's so small. That's the advantage of the guest house. It's a huge building. Right. You have lots of place to be. You don't have to be in the same room. Yeah. But I have had couples say we need two buildings. We're going to be on retreat. We'll have supper together in one of them, but the rest of the day we want to have, by yourself.
I think honestly, looking at my husband and I situation, it would probably be more similar to that because he would want a lot more space than I would. And knowing myself, that might be a good thing if I did come, is just to be like, okay, this is a time where you can work on really diving into the silence and diving into your scripture and your prayer life. So yeah, I think in reality, that would probably be us. Well, especially if you had the bigger building, maybe we would still do whatever, but just making sure that we would be separated. I would probably be more of the craft person and he would probably be in the library. So yeah. So at this point, do you think that, or have you been talking to any young women in terms of them maybe coming to the Hermitage to be with you?
Well, for 40 years, yes.
Yeah.
But it's just a wise way of looking at things. There's a time for things and there's a time not, like it says, Proverbs, I think it is. And I'm not at an age now where I could do formation for a young woman. And the reason is the last time I did it, and this young woman was with me for 3 months, which is very intense. I took her for class every day. I mean, if you're talking about religious formation, it's like going to school. Yeah. And I certainly could do it as far as the knowledge and, certainly enjoy doing it. But I don't have time anymore. I've got so much else that I'm taking care of. I don't have that kind of time because I spent a whole year just getting ready for her to come for 3 months. Wow. And then I taught her a class, an hour and a half every day, the 5 weekdays, Monday through Friday. You know what? I can't do all that anymore.
Well, I mean,
so I'm content to be the only sister there.
Well, what about someone in your situation who maybe
was already a religious?
Yeah, and feeling like they had the call to silence. Have you had any
We have had religious apply. Mm-hmm, we have, but you still have to take them for formation too because they've never been a hermit.
Oh, I see.
And we studied the Desert Fathers and the Rule of Saint Benedict and some of those early documents and medieval documents of hermit life. It's still a learning process, very intense learning process. So even though that person is a mature religious, a mature woman, there's still formation involved. So I just have to be realistic to say at my age, after 40 years, we gave it a try. It doesn't look like it was in the Lord's planning, but the Lord always can surprise you. So my biggest news for this year, besides the guest house, is the Lord sent me a married couple to live at Marymount. They've been there since June 29th. They've been there for 2 months. And how it feels is like they've always been there.
Really?
Seems so normal.
So are they retired?
Mm-hmm.
And they're just going to...
They raised their 9 kids, and they said to their children and grandchildren, you know what? We're young enough and healthy enough to have a life that's different now, and it's going to be different for you, and it's going to be good, but it's going to be different for us, and it'll be good too.
So
they pray with me. They work with me. We go to Mass together. Now we don't have a priest there. Father Bill left last Monday, a week ago. So that's really monumental for Marymount, because she has been helping me clean for 29 years. So she knows Marymount as far as, how you would. Yeah. And then he's, when you raise 9 kids, you can't afford a tradesman for everything that goes wrong in your house. So he's learned to do everything. Right. He's a really, really talented young man. I call him young because he's younger than me. So that's a tremendous help for the whole plant. Yeah.
So do you think that this will turn into, so is that a possibility? Is there a possibility for a community that is intervocational then at that point? Or would
I don't know. How long do you want me to live?
Well, as long as God needs me to live. So, but I guess because I actually talked to another sister at Belmont Abbey, and she had an idea for a community where there would be little houses, kind of like a hermit. Yeah, it's actually very similar. She wanted like a hermitage, but she wanted to have just a communal eating place, and then there could be couples and families and sisters, all living together, and it would be, the focal point would be obviously be the Mass and prayer, and have like structures of religious life, but inviting families in, inviting married couples and families in to live in that life more fully and more, I guess, intently, in that their community is they might leave for their jobs, but they're coming back, and they're coming back to this community where there's these times for doing things, right? This was kind of her idea. I don't know if it went anywhere, but I'm wondering, is that like a possibility?
It has been a possibility for other places in our country that I know of.
Okay.
But I don't know what God's going to do to Marymount in the future, but I personally probably wouldn't go that direction, because the silence and solitude are so important. Yeah.
It would be hard with families.
I don't see children participating in that. That's too intense for them.
Right. And that's what I was thinking. When I was thinking about visiting, when you said the anniversary, I was like, oh, beautiful, because guess what? Usually when you do something for your anniversary, you don't have your children with you.
Right.
So that's...
Yeah, like date night.
Yeah, exactly. Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay, so I didn't actually know that was a possibility in the church, that we could have like a mixed community. I didn't.
Well, there is a community that's 40 years old also in New Mexico. It's where Father Bill left from Marymount to go be with them permanently now. He's known them for even before he was a priest, but they mainly were families. Wow. And I can think of 2 families young married couple who raised their children there, and now the children have, they're adults in someplace else. And one of the families has one of their sons is a Jesuit priest.
Wow.
So
I think community, regardless of if you are religious, I think I've seen a trend, don't know how popular it is, but I've seen a trend where young families are trying to have like a rule of life for their own family, and then trying to live in community. So I think there's obviously a good, and there's obviously something holy that's pulling people, even in their crazy family life, to the silent solitude and the way of the religious vocation, and the focus on Christ in a more intent and structured way. Definitely. So it's kind of beautiful to see these different communities like you're talking about pop up. Yeah, just really interesting. Again, prior, when we talked a month ago, one of the things we talked about is that sometimes sisters nowadays are just not as seen. And so it's interesting when you get to sit down with one to actually talk to them.
I appreciate the invitation.
Absolutely.
As you can tell, I don't have any trouble talking. Now, here's the thing people say most often. You're too polite to say it, so I'll say it for you. People say, how can you be a hermit when you're so talkative? And what I found out after 40 years, the right answer is that's mixing up a personality and a vocation. Yeah. A personality like mine, who I'm an extrovert and I'm a teacher and I like to talk, isn't incompatible with being a hermit. I get to talk to God all the time. Now you have to feel sorry for God.
He gets to listen to it all. Well, again, I know that we are running short on time, so I just want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story and talking to us about religious life. If anyone is interested in visiting, we kind of talked about this before, try to go to the website, give you a phone call, fill out the appropriate paperwork. You know, is it an application? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else that you would like to say about the Hermitage, or anything else that you think that people should know?
Well, let's see. I guess the only question I have is, if you invite me back, we could do a whole different topic.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I actually think people don't know this because we were talking offline, but we had talked about having you back on. So I'm very excited. You'll see her again.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it so much too. I'm so glad we got to have this longer discussion.
And God bless you and your family.
Oh, thank you. We could use all the prayers we could.
Well, join the club. Don't forget to pray for me.
I'll make you a deal. You pray for me, I'll pray for you.
It's a deal. I accept.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Desert Wanderers. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up as well as subscribe down below. We're produced by Salt and Light Radio, so you can find us on social platforms at Salt and Light Radio or Desert Wanderers Podcast. We produce episodes every week and we launch them for you on Wednesdays. So make sure to tune in for next week's episode, and we'll see you then.